Welcome to the Virtual Office Hours, History of Evangelicalism edition, episode 6. I'm John Fia here in the History Department at Messiah College. Megan Piet, as always, behind the camera as our producer. Have the Founding Fathers with us, as usual, as well. And we have been discussing the South and evangelicalism in the early 19th century South. And we've been looking at Christine Heyrman's, we've been reading Christine Heyrman's book, Southern Cross, The Beginnings of the Bible Belt. Every time I read this book, I get more and more out of it. It really makes a compelling argument about the way in which evangelicalism comes to dominate the South around the time of the mid-19th century, around the time of the Civil War. And as Heyrman notes, there's nothing inevitable about evangelicalism's dominance in the South. In fact, much of the culture of the South is largely defined, as we talked about in the last episode, by Anglicanism. And a culture that, especially a masculine culture of Anglicanism, that really is quite the opposite from the more feminine oriented, as Heyrman gets into some gender analysis here. So the feminine oriented kind of evangelicalism that's being promoted and preached in the South. So we talked a little bit about some of the earlier chapters in the last office hours. We had a good discussion, I thought, yesterday in class about evangelicalism as this kind of feminine religious expression. And clearly those who were defining the religious culture, the old Anglican culture of the South, which tended to be masculine, we'll talk about that in a second, tended to see evangelicals as very feminine. Their religion, evangelicals, men and women, evangelical religion was very emotional. It was, filled with all kinds of physical kind of manifestations like touching and hugging and greeting one another with a holy kiss. Many Anglicans and Southerners saw evangelical ministers, Methodist ministers. Heyrman mentions Thomas Coke as even looking effeminate to some degree, speaking in effeminate tones. The Methodists especially are viewed as sort of unmanly because of their history of not participating in the American Revolution. You have people like Francis Asbury, this Methodist itinerant, and all the other Methodist itinerants who actually go into hiding during the Revolution because they're not willing to express their kind of manly sense of patriotism. Asbury, spends most of the Revolution, I think, hiding in the attic in a Methodist's house in Delaware. So Heyrman shows how this kind of emotional evangelicalism, as she calls this feminine side of evangelical, sort of conflicts with the rough culture, if you will, of the masculine culture of the South. Men tend to celebrate things like patriotism, and which is very much a masculine idea, right? Being involved in civic life, the public sphere, militarism. Becomes big, right? Men are willing to fight. Men are individualistic. They don't necessarily like the communal nature of evangelicalism. So this clash, I think, is what really dominates the fifth and final chapter. And then Heyrman concludes that in order for evangelicalism to survive, they are going to have to adapt to this culture. We debated in class whether to call it adapting to the culture, accommodating to this culture. But what you get by the time you get to the 1850s is a very kind of now muscular form of evangelicalism. You have evangelical men sharing their testimonies, talking about how they were hellraisers, when they were young, or, how they were, these sort of tough figures who God saved through the gospel. You have evangelical men going into the public sphere, especially the political sphere, like Peter Cartwright, who becomes this evangelical politician, actually runs against Abraham Lincoln in an election. I think it's in the 1830s. So it reminded us, I think, in class of of the kind of muscular Christianity you see in evangelicalism today. You know, athletes like Tim Tebow and others who exemplify this kind of muscular form of Christianity. And as Heyrman puts it, I mean, the accommodation or the adaptation is, I mean, really what's happening here is the Southern culture of honor, right? The male masculine culture of honor and, you know, various forms of leisure associated with dueling or tavern going or horse racing and cockfights and all of these kinds of things becomes in many ways spiritualized, becomes this merger is what's really going to shape evangelicalism. So it's a nice study here of change over time, this kind of feminine evangelicalism, in some ways that has a very much a prophetic voice against the larger Southern culture, challenges the institution of slavery and so forth. By the time you get to the Civil War, it has fully adopted to the more masculine culture of the South. You now begin to see evangelicals even owning slaves. And once again, another student in the class mentioned, you know, once again we have evangelicals adapting very well to the culture, accommodating to the culture. We saw it with the Hatch book. We saw it in many ways with the Whitfield biography by Harry Stout that we read earlier in class. So this is, I think it was a productive conversation about evangelicalism in the South. We came to the conclusion of what the Bible Belt, the origins, if you will, of the Bible Belt, and Heyrman helped us do that. We're moving on to George Marsden's Fundamentalism in American Culture next, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching.